Good morning. I'm Daniel Markham. I thought I'd give you a quick tour of what I've been doing lately with the VS Code IDE, AWS services, a bunch of other stuff. Basically, as a bit of background, back in December, I had this idea of doing a sort of what's the simplest blog system I could create, and the answer I came up with then was basically using Airtable, which is a pretty cool public sort of web database you can get to. I think they have a free tier, a bunch of sample tables you can use. I had to have some sort of data storage, and I wanted simple, maintenance free. So Airtable was really the only dynamic system I chose. And then Airtable has a JSON API. So from there, I actually took Bash and Vue and wrote a real quick, pull some JSON down into a file, and then Vue just reads the JSON file off and makes the blog. Pretty simple system. Basically, it's proof of concept. It was a cool project. I enjoyed it. I really thought that I could do a lot more with it. Didn't know if I wanted to or not. Probably still do not want to do more with it. But anyway, that sat there for about a month or two, and then in January, I thought, well, why don't I just take it a step further, just to play around with the technology some. So I spent about a couple weeks or so, and actually made Vue components and used an inheritance system and made it sort of a pluggable blogging system. So that was cool. I also used some functional JavaScript and some ECMA stuff, the component system. That was fun too. So then I had still a very, very small static single page app that got things from Airtable whenever you wanted to. You could cron it, you could put it on a thumb drive. It didn't really matter, but it was basically a static blog. And then the idea being, if I wanted to add things like games or commenting, it would just be a plugin. It'd just be a Vue component plugin. So that was fun. So I left it at that. I think I did a video back then, and what I said back then was, because it's static, I can deliver it on a USB drive. I can put it on a web server folder somewhere. There's even, I think I said, some magic AWS stuff you can do where I can put the blog into a GitHub account repo. And then when I change the GitHub, it actually pushes the blog and the content out on AWS to all the CloudFront places all over the world, such that it's published everywhere and it's automatically scalable, and I'm only paying for the cycles I'm using. So it was much different blogging paradigm than most people are used to. I think a lot of us programmers, when we go really simple, we'll start writing a script or something, or we can just type in the HTML on a notepad file. This is somewhere in between because it's a pluggable system. It is flat, but there's not an IDE or anything for it. I thought it was kind of cool. So then I left that alone. I keep leaving this alone and coming back to it. And so this month, this is March 2019, I really need to pick up some AWS Kung Fu. I didn't have a lot. Well, I played with it for a while, but I didn't have the degree of Kung Fu I wanted. So I took the same project and went back to it. And this time I said, okay, this AWS magic stuff, I need to figure out how it works. I need to write my own code. That was just a ton of stuff. So the first shot at this was just sort of a proof of concept hackathon type thing. Is this cool or not? And it was cool. The second sort of round in January was more of a sort of a technology proving, a combination of proof of concept and a learning experience. I knew I could do Vue components, and I'd play with them a little bit, but I wanted to really try them. And so now we're like, this third round, it's fully into learning territory, because a lot of the things we'll be touching I had never used before. So this was cool stuff. I think the usefulness for you guys is AWS, VS Code, and how I went through the learning cycle. I have this list of stuff you can probably see on your screen. I think that the interesting part with this third bit was the amount of thrashing involved. And I had a story I wanted to accomplish. A user story. went at that story. I failed. I thrashed. I Googled. I tried to find the answer to the specific problem I had. Sometimes it was enough to get me through. And many times it was not. So then I'd go back. And I was always looking at a workflow. I'd go back and what I got here, I do the research. Then I do the look at the context. So I would try to find courses that would cover the general area I was doing. So if I was doing S3, for instance, I would try to find 5 or 10 hours to spend on S3, which is that kind of, we're talking about T-shaped people a lot of times in Agile, and we talk about deep dives, and it's probably more important to be sort of a T-shaped worker. And so I tried to go forward and couldn't do it. And so then I did some research, and then now I'm kind of spreading out in the whole context and trying to go like a mile wide, inch deep to get myself oriented around the problem. I find a lot of reasons I can't solve a problem is because I don't understand the right question to ask. And so when I can't get it with Google, sometimes the best thing to do is to back up, and instead of continuing to Google or giving up, you just sort of say, okay, what is the world of X that I'm in, right? If I'm doing Lambda, what's the world of Lambda? Whatever this thing is, let's spend some time just talking about that general world. And so I look at the context and try to learn as much as I can about that in a fixed amount of time, usually a few hours. Go back to the user story. This may sound repetitive. It is. I go back to the user story again, and then I go a little bit further. I get lost to go back doing to the Google stuff. If that doesn't work, I'd maybe do a little more context. And if I still fail a third time, I'll go back and do some guided tour stuff. And this is the typical stuff you'll probably find on the web where it's like, how to do a website in 3 steps. I find that not as useful as many people, maybe you guys find, I don't know. To me, the problem is with this happy path kind of stuff that a lot of web guys do is that it always looks easy. They're always doing something I'm not doing. And I never understand why they're doing it. And so as long as I'm doing exactly what they're doing, we're good. But that's almost never true. So if I can find a guy who's doing the exact thing I need to do, and he's got an hour video or whatever, God bless him, I'm there. But that really happens. But I do the guided tour. I find that once I have the context, I've done some research, then when I go to the guided tour, I'm able to extrapolate from whatever they're doing to whatever my context is. So then usually, and I've never found this not to be true, by this third round, I've sort of broken through wherever I am, and I go back to the user story. And so I keep hitting that user story until I can reach the end point. The problems with this approach to learning is there's a stack depth. You may get several items in. Of course, this is just a general programming issue, so you guys are used to that. You keep pushing things in the stack you're working through, and then I tell you, there's a happy feeling at the end of a project when that stack starts popping off, and you're like, okay, solve this one, and then you get some momentum coming along, and suddenly you've solved 8 or 10 things, and pretty awesome stuff. There's also maintaining focus, which is a big one for me. I'd much rather be surfing the web or watching cat videos, especially when it gets stuck. And that's a bummer, but it's just the way it is. And then finally, there's motivation. And I found with AWS, motivation became even more of an issue because as much as I wanted to finish my story and I wanted to learn the stuff, and I was having a blast, some of the cycle time on this stuff was kind of brutally slow. One of the things that occurred to me, again, I already knew, but just kind of reminded me that if you've got a 30-second or a 5 or 10 minute build cycle, that's going to just suck the life right out of you. So whatever you're doing, you want to gin through the build and test really, really quickly. And I think a lot of times we let that get out of hand too quick, too easily, and then things just kind of fall off into the mud. All right, so that's kind of where we are. That's how we got here. So we're going to look at all this tech today. Wow, where did I start? Well, the first thing I had to do was set up a Cloudformation Stack. Let's find this here. Now, first thing I had to do is set up an IDE. There's source. There's test. I don't know if you guys can make these out or not. Cloudformation, there we are. Okay. And Cloudformation Basic, if you haven't, don't know what this is, it's a parameterized AWS configuration file. It's probably cloud programming software defined network software controlled platform as a service. It's all those things. Basically, if you want to configure AWS in a certain way, you can either go to the console on the web and start poking around, or you can write code. And what I found, which anybody who's done database work in the past probably knows this, console is awesome for figuring out what you want to do, because a lot of times the UI guys have been through and tried to figure out what goes together, and there's some help, and there's all kinds of easy smeezy stuff. You don't want to be doing the console. You may be learning. It probably makes a good REPL to go play with. But the problem with the UI stuff and just sort of poking till it works is then how do you make it work again? And so learn if you have to, however it takes, the UI, whatever. But really, when you want to do the work, you want to do it in a code source controlled fashion. So this is what this Cloudformation Stack does. I've got my parameters here, and there's some conditions and resources. And basically what I do is I set up two buckets. There's an S3 has buckets, places to put files. One bucket takes all the JSON file I'm pulling down from Airtable. And then the other bucket just logs on the first bucket. I have to set up an IAM execution role. For Lambda, I'm going to write a function to pull that JSON down. That function has to have permissions. So everything you do has to be associated with some sort of permissions object, which is really sucky, but it's good. And the nice thing is that the stack here keeps all of those resources in one spot, and then I can drop the entire stack, and it just sort of resets Amazon, as opposed to trying to go around and click to remember what I was doing. Then I have a Lambda function that I name. The Lambda function is some code I've uploaded, and I'll show you that in a second, and put it in an S3 bucket. Yeah, it's not defined in here. This is not the code as much as it is sort of the configuration of the pieces that hook up the code. I had to have a generator every 5 minutes sets up a call to go run the Lambda function. And then I have some outputs to this stack. It's not, a lot of this stuff is not necessary, but the outputs actually, if I use this Cloudformation stack in another stack, sort of tells me what I created. And there's some metadata. So that's all that. Let's take a look at the Lambda function now. I freely admit I copied a lot of this from a friend of mine, and that's also a really good way to start. To copy, took it apart, rewrote it. What do we got here? Okay, so here's his code he gave me to do the Airtable stuff in Python. Never programmed in Python before. Python looks kind of fun. I like to play with it some more. I did a bit here, like a very tiny bit, but I didn't really spend any time. So nice thing about Python, I didn't get stuck at all. And I was really programming it by writing the code here, then uploading it to Amazon, and then running it after I build the stack. So it was many times 10 or 15 minutes later that it actually ran, and I don't think I had any instances where it failed. So I've got a Airtable token, app. Both of these I keep in a secure, well, it's a parameter storage system for the system manager. And that's pulled out here. So whenever you're keeping secrets, you keep that in a different part of Amazon. They've got a few special places for that. And that way I can share the code with you guys, and you don't have to see my secret token or anything. Another recurring theme with Amazon is that it does everything 17 different ways. So whatever you're doing, I could have done this as a Lambda, I could have done this as an E2 instance, I could have done this as a code build pipeline. Yeah, there's just at least 3 different ways. There's probably 3 or 4 other ways. All right, so then I've got some variables it sets up. Yeah, this is a very simple, I guess, but I know it's simple. We have a Lambda handler function. Boom. It gets an event and some context from from AWS. The context will tell you a lot of things like what are the environment variables, how much time do I have, a bunch of cool stuff. You'll probably use that a bit. The event really is it's just a JSON string, and then it's up to you what to do with it. Nicely, a lot of the tooling sort of takes that JSON string and then deserializes it to whatever JSON object you want. I thought that was kind of neat. And so then I actually don't really care about any of this stuff because I'm not responding to an event as much as I'm just running every 5 minutes. And I actually, if you can see, I've got 6 tables. I just actually just do each table over. This is an unrolled loop. But hey, it worked. I didn't want to spend too much time with it. I'll probably spend more time telling you about it than I spent coding it. So that's the Python code. And then what else I have to show you? And if I show you this similar thing in .NET, I did this side by side. I thought I would do a Python, C#, and F#. Then I would code similar stuff in each one. What happened was I got over here to this F#. Where are we at here? Let me see. There we are. So here's an F#, also pretty similar function. This comes from the S3 example from the .NET Lambda code. I've got this sort of wrapped up function, and then I've got this Lambda handler. So here we have the same handler as before. Here we have the event and the context, just like the Python code. And here I actually copied over the stuff that the Python code did. I actually put something into a S3 bucket. You'll note that this is set up async. When I got this, yep. Yes, async await task. Of course, you run it. You don't really want to. You want to use the threading stuff, even if it's going to run synchronously. That way, you can scale out. And I'm not sure what I haven't figured out yet. If you get behind, if AWS doesn't give you like an array of stuff, which would also work really well with the way they've got this set up here. I reached this point with the F#, and I thought, well, okay, golly, now we're just sort of at standard F# stuff. We make an object or make a structure, throw it out to an async function, and Amazon does this. So I really kind of bailed at this point because I understood everything I wanted to, and I already know how to code F#. And so that also made me bail out on the C# version, so I quit early on this. So that's the Lambda. That's the Cloudformation Stack. So, yeah, one of the interesting questions I had was, what I want the VS Code to do, since I'm building up the IDE, what I want I mean, when you're coding, C++, you're coding, you hit the button, it tests or builds, and you're kind of done. And if you've got a build pipeline, when you check it in, it does all these things. Well, there's no kind of check-in process here. So do I want to, every time I build, to like build out to the cloud? Or do I want just to wait till I check into GitHub? Amazon has a whole code pipeline system. Do I really keep my code in Amazon and have it handle the build and everything? I decided no. I really, as much as this has to do with Amazon, I didn't want to couple with Amazon. I can run this as a Lambda because I write pure functions in F# anyway as microservices. It doesn't really matter to me where the heck the dang thing runs at. There is a missing question of how those pure function service / things sort of hook together. Lambda handles that with the Cloudformation Stack that we're going over today, but I can do the same thing by deploying them all in the same directory. I can do message passing. How the functions talk to one another, what they use for persistence, where they live. I want to be as decoupled as possible, that type of stuff, from actually what the functions do. So Lambda and me kind of are philosophically very similar anyway. I could see writing a bunch of microservices in F# and then deploying them simultaneously in Lambda and on, say, a Linux directory somewhere. And I imagine it would work the same. I think with the right library, it really wouldn't matter where the data comes from. There's a lot to be said about orchestration and workflows and transactions here that I'm not going to get into. Okay. So that's the F# code, the C# code, the Cloudformation stuff. I don't need to show you the Git stuff. I went over the build thing, so I got to go to the website. Okie dokie. Okay, so here's a Lambda Manager. There we go. I've got some things I've set up, previous sites. I got the little Internet of Things button. It's really cool. You guys want to play with Lambda? This is probably one of the best ways of doing it. You get a little button here. You push the button, and the little light blinks. Very important to have the blinking light. And then I got two buttons. So the light blinks for a while with one button, and then later on I've set it up so that I get an email. Blink screen, I get an email. It's really awesome. It's like if I ever get lonely, I push a button and it sends me an email. My daughter found this and sent me 80 emails one day. I've also got a second button. Never could set it up. Doesn't do a damn thing except make the light blink. I don't know why. They're both the identical buttons. Never did figure out why. Like I said, I spent 2 or 3 hours with the setup process. It's not that complicated. Okay, so here's the Lambda. Here's the Python code we just spoke about. I just showed you guys. All right. So like I said, there's a console you can get into. One of the things, a lot of odd things that you need to sort of figure out here. One of the things was, where is this Lambda code living at? Right. So I uploaded the Lambda code as a zip file to an S3 bucket. And then I pointed to it in the Cloudformation Stack when we set up the services and everything. So then when I go to edit or see what's going on with the code, what am I editing? Am I editing the file inside the zip over on the S3 bucket? Did it make a copy of it? What the heck's going on here? And it wasn't clear to me. I finally figured it out. After I figured it out, I found the answer somewhere, but it wasn't obvious. What happens is, the reason you upload the code S3 bucket and then point to it is not that you're loading sort of a directory to use as a running program, which is what I would think it would default to. What you're actually doing is just sort of staging the code so that when you then hook up the Lambda function, it has a place to pull it from. So this is its own copy of my function. If I wanted to change my function, I would change the function in the IDE. I would re-upload the zip, and then I'd have to rerun the stack. Or I could go in, and what I ended up doing for a while was actually copying all the function out of the IDE and then pasting it here, and then running it. So this is nice if you want to run the code on Amazon. There's a test button. You can make the little test button. Yeah. You accept some test data. Like I said, it's all JSON. Test data. And like I said, since I really don't care what the dang stuff is anyway, I'll just leave that stuff alone. Create the test data. Okay, and then I can actually hit the button, and it runs the code, tests the code using the data I just made. And this is really awesome because it does nothing. By that I mean there's no, just says succeeded or not. Sometimes, and here's all the tables it pulled down. Sometimes if you have problems, you actually want to look at the trace. There's a tracing service down here. You click that and you save the function. You can go back and see line by line stuff. Another gotcha, if you click the trace button, it actually sets new permissions onto your Lambda function to do the trace work, which of course it would have to. But by setting the new permissions on there, it actually changes the permissions associated with the Lambda. So when you go to drop the stack, Cloudformation says, oh, hang on, no, I can't actually drop the stack because you have something new pointing into this. So there's this odd thing going on, which in some cases the linkages are important. There's a dependency chain going on, like here between the tracing and the stack. In some cases, there's not dependency going on between various things. You just send JSON over the wall somewhere and they pick it up. I'm okay with it, but it was not intuitive to me coming from a server programming PC background. I had to double check all of my assumptions. Anything else to show you here? I can show you the S3 stuff. That's probably about it. So S3 is the Amazon sort of hard drive, Dropbox. It's the storage system. Amazon has it so you can actually point an S3 bucket, make it into a website. So you just drop things in there and it's a website, which really cool for static websites. Like it a lot. This means that I can take all of my static websites and just make them into buckets, and I pay pennies per gigabyte for storage. A bunch of stuff I have here. So take a look at the I have an Airtable Airblock TGB. Here's all the tables I've been getting all along, right? And you can see it's been updating about every 5 minutes. Here, this entries JSON, it'll hang for an hour or so, then it'll update. I don't know why it does that. I don't know if it's an Airtable thing, API hanging, or Amazon timing out, but it does catch up, and I'm okay with that for now. You don't have to chase down every problem. Here's the authors. Oh yeah, the other thing, other got me that was non-intuitive. I got to show you this because this hurt for a while. When I first started using S3, I'd set these logs up. So here I've got a logs.airblog TGB. So when I showed you the Cloudformation Stack, I said, okay, here this bucket's going to be for the web page stuff, and then this bucket will be for logs for that bucket. Well, I set the logs up, and I S3. Yeah, set the logs up. I wasn't really clear what it was logging. I mean, I know I just assumed since the bucket was called logs, any kind of log would go in there. That's not true. The Lambda functions go out to the CloudWatch logs, which is another thing. This just logs the access, the S3 events. So S3 is such a huge deal because it handles data storage. There's a ton of stuff, like there's a data retention policy, the triggers. It's like a super duper hard drive from hell. It does all sorts of really super cool things. There's various ways you can load S3. There's servers you can put on site. There's dedicated lines. There's a ton of stuff. And so anyway, when I had problems, I went to this logs bucket. Hey, I can see how my program's running. Of course, this was not true, but I didn't know that. And I click on the little log event, and I'd say, oh, there it is. And there's my log. Cool. So I'd click on the little object URL here at the bottom, and every dang time it would say access denied. And I don't know if you can see this or not. Blah, 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 access denied. And then this whole, I will give it this. It's not as long as the stack trace. It's sure as dang impenetrable as one. But that just happened over and over again. So I'd have a problem. I click this, it'd say access denied. And so I'd look at permissions, and I'd go around, and I spent a lot of time trying to figure out, well, heck, if I'm calling this API on Airtable, do I have the right API key? Do I have permissions to get out from Amazon to the website? Is Airtable blocking a certain block of IP addresses inside AWS? Chased down a ton of stuff, and I was pretty much smoking crack the entire time because that wasn't what was going on. I didn't know what actually was happening here. So if you're here and you're looking at a log entry, this is not clear what's happening. When I click this to open the log entry, what Amazon does is check to see if I can access the log entry using the website, using a web browser. And I can't because I haven't set it up to be accessed. So it's telling me I can't get to the log entry. It's not telling me that the program couldn't get to the thing because, first of all, it's not logging the program. And second of all, it doesn't do program logging anyway. The correct thing to do is to click the download button. And then from download, bring it up in Notepad or whatever. I've got it set for EditPad Pro. There you go. Yeah, and who knew? There's something that looks a lot more like a reasonable log. And if you look at this, it just says I did a REST GET public access. So this tracks every dang thing I'm doing, right? Which is cool, but you definitely want to enact a data retention policy on this. One of the nice things about using Cloudformation the way I did was best practices are sort of baked in by whoever gave you the code to copy from. If I had set this up by hand, one of the reasons I didn't use AWS as much as I probably would have is because I was extremely afraid of spending a lot of money and not being aware of that. So I set up an alert up on this time around. But you can use resources to spend money fairly quickly here, and it's scary. And I don't know what's worse, the fact you could spend money fairly quickly, or that you could be in a spot you could spend money fairly quickly and not care. So at least I'm a cheapskate. I'm going to find it and try to fix it, but I'm even more worried about a lot of companies that spin up a bunch of servers, leave them running. All right, so that's Cloudformation. I'll go up here. Cloudformation S3. We did logs, did Lambda. This is a non-trivial exercise, guys. Look at this. Yeah, these are. It's like like Walmart in here. Whatever you want to do, there's some guy doing it, writing code for you in AWS. Not necessarily a feature. I'm quite concerned that AWS does far too much, and far too easily. I know that sounds like a weird thing to be concerned about, but I have a very simple need as a corporate manager and a corporate programmer. I need my code to live in a certain place and to serve functionality to various people. Whether that's done using DynamoDB or whatever, it's okay. I mean, those are cool things, and I may need to use those. But this ain't no video game. I don't come in here and click on a bunch of cool stuff and try to wire it up. That's not the way you go about building a system. So I don't get into lecture mode, but you go about building a system by writing a very small piece of functionality that does something you want, and then trying to find the minimal amount of stuff to stick together to deliver that to somebody. I think that's it. Appreciate you guys stopping by. Been a fun project. I think now I am done with this. Nothing else I want to do. I've got this set up. I'm going to move some sites over. The only thing I can think of adding here is I may make a view module to do some sort of commenting, Discord, Commento. I'm not really sure what yet, Discus. But I would like to have a commenting module for my blogging system. Thanks for dropping by, and I will see you on the internet.